The chamber hummed with restrained chaos, the kind of tension that builds when ego and truth share the same table. Papers rustled. Eyes darted. Somewhere beneath the fluorescent hum, a storm waited. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone, voice measured, threading logic through noise until Matt Gaetz's interruptions sliced the air like a dull blade. His tone carried the practiced smirk of someone who believed interruption was power and silence was surrender. The room froze. Crockett's gaze lifted, not in anger, but in warning. That subtle calm, that stillness before eruption, drew every eye in the chamber. You could almost hear the collective breath of the nation held hostage behind screens, waiting for the next move. The arrogance on one side of the table was almost cinematic, a man convinced the moment belonged to him. But history has a habit of miscasting its villains, and as the clock ticked forward, Crockett's composure hardened into resolve. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was precision loading. He tried to silence her. But what she said next became the line America couldn't stop replaying, and within 30 seconds, the balance of power in that room shifted forever. It began hours earlier, another hearing that was supposed to be routine. Another stage where loudness masqueraded as leadership. The committee room buzzed with overconfidence, the kind that only power unchecked can breed. Matt Gaetz leaned back in his chair, smiling like a man rehearsing for headlines. Every question he asked came laced with provocation. Every pause designed for performance. He wasn't debating policy. He was auditioning for outrage. Across the table sat Jasmine Crockett, quiet, attentive, measuring every word that ricocheted through the room. To many, she seemed almost invisible. Another calm voice in a storm of noise. But calm can be dangerous when it belongs to someone who knows the weight of truth. She didn't flinch when Gaetz mocked her tone, didn't blink when he tried to cut her short. Her patience wasn't submission. It was strategy. He came to dominate the room. She came to defend the truth. That's how it felt watching them, two different Americas colliding. One fed on sound bites, the other carried substance. Around them, cameras blinked like hungry eyes, waiting for the next viral spark. Everyone thought they'd seen this show before, the grandstanding. The dismissive smirk, the woman expected to yield. But no one expected her counterpunch to come so fast, or hit so hard before the microphones and the memes. Matt Gaetz had already perfected his performance. His brand wasn't built on policy or progress, it was built on spectacle. Every hearing, every confrontation, every soundbite was a stage. And Gaetz played his part like a man who believed the camera loved him more than truth ever could. To Gaetz, politics was theater, and the louder you were, the more powerful you looked. He learned early that outrage sold better than integrity. When others paused to think, he filled the silence with smirks and sarcasm. When debates called for nuance, he delivered noise. His interruptions weren't accidents, they were weapons. Designed to throw off balance, to claim space. To remind the room that he didn't need respect as long as he had attention. Clips of his confrontations flooded social media. There he was, finger raised, chin tilted, speaking over colleagues with that trademark smirk. The headlines rarely quoted his ideas because there weren't many to quote, but they loved his volume. He was a creature of the spotlight, chasing virality while pretending to champion order and accountability. The irony was cinematic. The man who preached decorum thrived on chaos. He helped create, critics saw it clearly. He doesn't debate, he dominates airtime, one commentator said. Another called him the embodiment of political theater's worst instincts. But for Gaetz, criticism was currency. Every feud, every viral clip, every outrage moment reinforced his narrative. The rebel unafraid to offend. He didn't want to win arguments. He wanted to trend in quieter moments. You could almost imagine the calculation behind that smile. He knew the performance. He knew how to bait opponents, how to look unbothered while provoking fury. And for years it worked. Room after room, witness after witness. He played the same role, the untouchable showman, who never met a silence he couldn't fill. Until Jasmine Crockett entered the room, because when arrogance grows too comfortable, it forgets how fragile its mask really is. Gaetz believed this hearing would be another episode in his ongoing show, Another opportunity to turn authority into applause. But this time, his co-star refused to read from his script as he leaned forward. Preparing another interruption, he didn't notice the subtle shift, the silence that didn't break, the eyes that no longer looked amused. He mistook composure for weakness. He mistook restraint for retreat. And that mistake would cost him the room. He had built a career out of drowning out others. But on this day, his voice met its echo, sharper, steadier, unflinching. His performance had finally found an audience that refused to play along. Long before her name trended, before her voice echoed across committee rooms, Jasmine Crockett was a fighter not for fame, but for fairness. Born in Texas, she carried the grit of the South, but none of its silence. Her beginnings weren't framed in privilege or power. They were carved from late night's law books. In the quiet certainty that justice should never depend on who can shout the loudest. She started her career as a public defender, standing between the voiceless and a system that too often forgot mercy. Those who knew her then say she never raised her voice, even when anger would have been justified. She let the facts speak louder than fury. Every case hardened her resolve, but not her heart. When doors closed, she learned to knock harder. When power ignored her, she learned to make truth impossible to overlook. By the time she entered Congress, she wasn't just a lawmaker. She was living proof that authenticity could outshine arrogance. She wasn't born into the spotlight. She carved her way into it through substance. Her speeches carried warmth and weight. Her words felt less like talking points, more like convictions dressed in calm. Critics tried to frame her composure as passivity. They mistook her pause for hesitation, her silence for surrender. But those who had watched her rise knew better. Behind that calm exterior was calculation, a precise mind that saw every interruption, every smirk, every act of dismissal, as a chance to strike sharper next time. Crockett didn't chase the camera. The camera came to her. When debates turned toxic, she refused to descend into chaos. Her weapon was control. Her power was clarity. She didn't need to outlell anyone. She only needed 30 seconds of truth to expose a lifetime of noise. And yet, she sat in that committee room across from Gaetz. The energy felt different. It wasn't just another clash of ideology. It was a collision of worlds, one built on bluster, the other on backbone. He saw a target. She saw a test, and when arrogance tried to drown out her voice, she didn't shout. She struck with words sharpened by purpose. Calm, laced with defiance. Because when silence turns to fire, the room never forgets who lit the match. The room was already vibrating with impatience, overlapping voices, restless movements, the rhythmic tapping of pens against polished wood. The chairman's gavel struck once, twice, but order was slipping away, lost to a rising tide of ego and interruption. At the center of it, Matt Gaetz leaned forward, words dripping with the kind of sarcasm that comes from a man too used to hearing himself talk. "Let's not pretend this is about justice," he sneered, his grin almost performative. The jab wasn't meant to persuade, it was meant to provoke. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes held steady, her posture straight as if anchored by something deeper than pride. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't meet noise with noise. She simply looked at him, a gaze so calm it almost felt like defiance. Around them, the air thickened. Even the cameras seemed to lean in, the lens hungry for fallout. One aide swallowed hard, another turned away, unable to look directly at what was unfolding. The tension wasn't in the words, the narration would later say. It was in the pause before she spoke. Gaetz interrupted again, this time louder, trying to wrestle back control of a moment he thought belonged to him. His smirk wavered when she didn't respond, when her silence stretched long enough to make. "Arrogance feel exposed," the chairman sighed. The gavel stilled, and for a brief second, the entire room froze, caught between chaos and clarity. You could hear the faint hum of microphones, the shuffle of papers, the sound of a breath drawn with intention, and then Crockett leaned in. Her voice calm yet edged with conviction, cut through the noise like a clean blade through smoke. The transformation was instant composure turning to fire, restraint turning to revelation. and then with 30 seconds and a microphone. She rewrote the room. Time seemed to stretch thin, like the air itself was waiting. The noise, the chatter, the tension, it all collapsed into one clean silence. Jasmine Crockett sat still, her hands folded, her breath steady, while Matt Gaetz's words hung in the air like smoke from a cheap cigar, loud, lingering, and ultimately hollow. And then, with a voice that didn't need to rise to be heard, she broke through. "If you're so afraid of hearing truth," she said, her tone slicing through the room, "you can leave the room, but don't you dare silence it." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Her words landed with the force of precision. Not volume, the kind that doesn't just answer arrogance but exposes it. Gaetz blinked, unsure whether to sneer or smile, as murmurs rippled through the chamber. Someone stifled a laugh. Another whispered, "She really said that?" Across the table, a quiet smirk from a Democratic colleague betrayed the collective satisfaction of watching composure triumph over chaos. Narration rolled over the moment like a cinematic score in 30 seconds. She didn't just defend herself, she dismantled a culture of arrogance. She leaned forward again, this time with deliberate calm. "Some of us came here to work," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "Some of us came here to be seen. I don't mind which one you are, but don't waste the people's time pretending they're the same thing." The room exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was release. The kind that only follows truth spoken without fear. Gaetz opened his mouth to reply, but the words faltered, tangled between disbelief and damage control. For once, he had no script, no line rehearsed for applause. Only the echo of her words filling the space he'd tried to dominate. Every second that passed felt historic. Phones came out. Staffers whispered. Clips were clipped before the moment was even over. Somewhere in the back, a C-SPAN camera captured her face, still calm, still steady. A portrait of conviction. And outside those walls, the spark caught. Within an hour, the clip was everywhere, looping through Twitter feeds. Clipped for TikTok, dissected on Reddit threads. Hashtags lit up like fireworks. Hashtag Crockett cuts through. Hashtag truth over noise. Hashtag 30 seconds of fire. Commentators couldn't resist. One headline read, "Jasmine Crockett delivers the congressional clapback of the year." Another said, "Matt Gaetz just learned what composure looks like." The narration deepened. Slow and cinematic, she didn't just win a debate. She reclaimed the room for every woman who's been interrupted, every voice told to wait its turn. In 30 seconds, she spoke for all of them. Clips played on repeat, edited with slow zooms, music swells, and captions bolded in all caps. Millions watched, shared, commented. This one user wrote, "Is how you end a man's monologue with a single sentence." Another, "Power, grace, precision. That's leadership," within hours. Her 30-second rebuke had over 12 million views. By nightfall, even late-night hosts were quoting her line. The world had seen arrogance meet its mirror and lose. Back in the hearing room, though the moment still hung like static in the air, Gaetz leaned back, forcing a grin that couldn't quite find confidence. Crockett didn't look at him again. She didn't need to. The silence that followed spoke louder than any closing remark. She adjusted her papers, straightened her posture, and gave a faint nod to the chairman, a quiet signal that her point had been made. And the moment sealed, because sometimes victory doesn't roar. It resonates. Narration closed the scene with quiet reverence in an age where shouting wins attention. She proved that truth whispered with conviction can shake a nation. The gavel struck once more, and the chamber stirred back to motion. But everyone knew the rhythm had changed. The hierarchy of noise had been rewritten, and as the clip spread beyond the walls of Congress, inspiring millions who saw themselves in her calm and her courage, one truth became undeniable. She didn't just shut him down. She reminded America what strength sounds like. But the story didn't end there, because what came next proved her fire had only just begun. The moment the hearing adjourned, the clip had already escaped the room. By the time the gavel struck, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube had become battlegrounds of awe, laughter, and vindication. Hashtags surge to the top of trending lists. Hashtag Crockett cuts through. Hashtag mic drop moment. Hashtag truth in 30 seconds. Within minutes, millions were replaying the scene, that look in Jasmine Crockett's eyes, the stillness before the strike, and the precision of her words that left a self-proclaimed provocateur in stunned silence. Comment sections turned into standing ovations. That's how you shut down arrogance with class? She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard. We just witnessed a masterclass in composure. Memes bloomed overnight. One showed Gaetz mid-interruption, captioned, "When you realize she's got the receipts." Another froze on Crocketts.com expression with the text, "Power, poise, period." Then came the talk shows. Cut to a montage. Late-night hosts replaying the clip with comic disbelief. News anchors labeling it the 30 seconds that broke the internet. Even morning shows weaving her quote into their opening banter. TikTok creators turned the moment into art edits layered with dramatic soundtracks, slow-motion zooms, cinematic lighting filters. One creator's caption read, "This isn't just politics, it's poetry." Narration swelled over the montage. In a world hungry for integrity, Crockett's composure became contagious. While others fought to be the loudest voice in the room, she reminded America that conviction doesn't need a microphone. It is the microphone. The clip transcended politics. Celebrities retweeted it. Activists praised it. Teachers played it in civics classes as an example of professionalism under pressure. Even critics who rarely agreed with her found themselves admitting one thing: she'd earned that silence. Every corner of the digital world had its take. Analysts called it a reset moment for congressional decorum. Commentators said it exposed a generational shift in tone, one where substance finally overpowered spectacle, and underneath the applause was something deeper. People weren't just cheering a viral victory. They were celebrating a kind of moral relief. For once, the script had flipped. The one who interrupted lost control. The one who stayed calm commanded it. Narration drew closer. Softer now. She didn't just win the moment. She reminded America why truth still matters, why composure is its own form of strength. The emotional ripple reached beyond social media. Viewers described feeling seen, especially women, professionals, and public servants who'd been talked over, dismissed, or underestimated. One viral post read, "She didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every woman who's ever had to pause mid-sentence so someone else could finish her thought." And as the noise online reached its peak, something else began to stir beneath it. A conversation not about personalities, but about principles. Narration closed with a resonant tone. Beneath the applause lay a deeper message, one that would echo far beyond that room. Because sometimes one moment of truth doesn't just break the internet. It restores belief in it. What we saw that day wasn't just a political spat. It was a battle for dignity. Two voices collided, but only one carried the weight of purpose. He spoke to be heard. She spoke to be remembered, in a chamber often ruled by volume. Jasmine Crockett reminded the nation that strength isn't measured in decibels. It's measured in restraint, in conviction, in the refusal to let arrogance define the dialogue. Her calm became its own kind of defiance, her silence a scalpel slicing through chaos. Matt Gaetz came armed with performance. She came armed with presence. And when the noise reached its peak, Crockett proved that grace isn't weakness. It's the quiet weapon of those who know exactly what they stand for. The scene echoed far beyond that congressional table. It became a mirror, reflecting every workplace, every conversation, every moment where someone tried to talk over truth. It was bigger than politics. It was personal. A reminder that composure under fire isn't submission. It's mastery. In a world addicted to outrage and volume, grace became rebellion. Crockett didn't just reclaim her voice. She redefined what power sounds like when it refuses to shout. Her 30 seconds became a cultural reset, a living reminder that the future doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the clearest narration softens. Landing with weight, sometimes the loudest mic drop is delivered in calm. And as the clip continues to echo across timelines, newsrooms, and dinner tables, it carries a question that lingers, one bigger than any debate. One that belongs to everyone watching from the sidelines of their own silence. Whose voice will you amplify? Because history doesn't only remember the ones who speak the most, it remembers the ones who spoke when it mattered. And Jasmine Crockett, in that brief, electric moment, made sure the world would keep listening. 30 seconds. That's all it took. 30 seconds of fire that turned a moment of interruption into a masterclass in composure. The same arrogance that tried to silence her ended up amplifying her message. Proof that when truth meets ego, truth doesn't just survive, it shines. When arrogance speaks, let truth answer, even if it takes only half a minute. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to shout to be heard. She needed only clarity, conviction, and courage. Because power isn't who speaks first. It's who finishes with purpose. As the scene fades, the camera lingers on her, calm, steady, unshaken. The noise fades, replaced by quiet strength. That's the image America replayed, not chaos, not fury, but control. A reminder that dignity is louder than disrespect. And grace is the last word. So if this moment moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, speak it, stand behind it. Because every time truth is interrupted, someone like Jasmine Crockett proves the mic still belongs to courage, to clarity, to us. This wasn't just her 30 seconds of fire. It was a spark, and it's still burning.